Hello and welcome to Stamper School. This is Julie Maxon, the Maine Stamper. I am an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up! And I live in Maine, USA. These short lessons in the basics of Stampin' Up! Products are intended to give you confidence that you need in paper crafting, whether you're a complete beginner or an entirely experienced stamper. Today's class, we are learning about ink pads. Now, you may call them Stampin' pads because technically that is the name. These are called Stampin' pads. I call them ink pads. I've always called them ink pads. That's how I've learned them. So whether you call them Stampin' pads or ink pads, the reality is they have ink in them and they're going to create beautiful images with your stamps. Now, first we're going to dive into a little bit of a history lesson because I love history. The history of the Stampin' pads by Stampin' Up! So there used to be a clamshell, more of a clam type case right here, and it had extra little feet on here. It had a lot of different grooves here in the sides, and the profile was a lot chunkier, a lot clunkier. It was hard to stack them up because they kind of would slide all around. And in the okay, so we're going back a ways. Bravo Burgundy. If you remember Bravo Burgundy, you've been with Stampin' Up! For a while. So in the old days, they had linen pads. This is actually a linen pad. So, and if you look at it very closely, if you have any linen pads, you're going to see actually like a little cross hatches of material in here. This is linen, and they were a very firm pad. You could really mush your stamp into the linen pads to ink it up, and they eventually switched from a linen pad. Another retired color, this is chocolate chip, same case, so we're still working with the same older cases. Then they changed to a foam pad. The foam pad is soft and squishy. It helps to have the ink apply to your stamp a little bit easier without all the work of smushing your stamp into the foam pad. The foam pads are soft, so you don't want to squish in too hard. Now, from this style of case, Stampin' Up! Came up with a new style, and this is a fabulous style. This is the current style. See how nicely they stack together? They have such a nice little profile. They're very compact. Now they still open basically the same way. You're going to open them from the end, and you're going, once it's open, just like this, you're going to slide over. I'm going to try to do it this way. It's probably going to be easier on my desktop. Slide it over. Now your stamp pad, your ink pad, is open, and it's fully all square, right? So it's not. Don't leave it partially open and try to ink up like this, because you're going to wobble as you get your stamp in here. So go ahead and close it completely, just like so. So this is an open ink pad, and I can see here that I have a sticker. This is kind of a faded sticker, but there are stickers that come with the ink pads so that you can label your inks or your Stampin' pads, which is really nice. We're going to talk about that in a second. But let's go back to the foam pad. Now the foam pad is squishy, so you don't need to mash your stamp into the pad. You're just going to tap it, right? So kind of tapping it just nicely, right? A lot of tapping is good. Squishing in is not good. If you squish in, you're really going to get ink everywhere, and you don't need ink everywhere. You only need ink on your stamp. So for this one, we're just going to do a little test here because I feel like my grape may need a little bit of a refill. So here's a nice image just like this, and we're going to talk a little bit now about refilling our ink pad. So I always recommend when you buy an ink pad, buy the refill at the same time. That way you have it when you need it. Now, it is true that your brand new ink pads are going to come really juicy, extra juicy actually. They may be too wet. So you may notice that with a brand new ink pad, as you're putting your ink onto your stamp, it may bubble up, and it shows up really well, these little bubbles in the photopolymer stamp, and then you get kind of a blotchy image. So to combat the extra juicy, so if it's too juicy, you're going to take the back of a plastic spoon and you're just going to squish the ink back into the pad. So like you're frosting a cake, you're just going to squish this down, kind of apply some pressure. Squish it down. Don't dig side to side, because you definitely don't want to dig into the sides of your spoon. You don't want to dig into the foam pad. The foam pad, again, is soft, so you can actually gouge this, and then that would damage the foam pad. So that gets rid of the extra juicy. This spoon also comes in really handy when it's time to refill with your ink. So what I like to do is just add drops all around the surface. Just go ahead and drop in kinds of ink, so you can see it kind of sinking in here just a little bit, but it also kind of stays right there on the surface as well. So to make this nice and even, again, I'm going to take the back of my spoon and I'm going to frost in my ink refills. So I'm just going to kind of squish this around a little bit, push this down in, and that's how you refill your ink pad. So if your ink pad's getting a little dry, just do that. I like to use the back of a spoon You can use a bone folder, but I feel like the bone folder has more edges, whereas the spoon has this little bowl shape, which just kind of makes it easier to work with. So now we're going to just try this one more time. So again, just tap. You don't have to squish, just tap. And oh, look at the difference. That is so much better. So check out your inks. Make sure that you have enough ink in your ink pads, and you can refill them as needed. Now, a little bit about the labels. So this is kind of a newer one of the ink colors that I haven't completely labeled yet. So on the back side of your stamp pad, Stampin' Up! Sends you labels to coordinate with the color. So this is Wild Wheat. I took this sticker off already and put it on the front. But there's also stickers here that are intended to go on the well of the inside of your ink pad. So I'm just going to peel this up and grab out the the full color one, right? So this one doesn't have any words on it. I'm going to open up my ink pad. Now this is going to go right here in this little well. And the reason that it goes here, and the reason that you want to use and take advantage of this, is that so when this ink pad is open on your surface, and maybe you have several ink pads open at the same time, you can actually now see that this is Wild Wheat. This is my Lost Lagoon, same situation. So I need to actually grab off I probably should have done this with it closed. Let's try this again. Before you do that, I'm going to recommend you keep your ink pad closed. You can peel these stickers off a little bit. Now they come in multiple languages. So you can use different languages if you want to. You could actually put them, I've seen people use them on all the sides of the stamp case. But I like to use this solid color here right into the inner well here, and I think I just put my finger in the ink a couple of times here. So this is something that you don't want to rush to do. You want to kind of take your time. But now as these are open on my desk, I can see that this is going to be Lost Lagoon and this is going to be Wild Wheat without picking it up and looking at the side or the back or closing it so I can see which ink I have in where. Now, one last thing I want to talk about a little bit before we close up here is these ink pads are designed to have the ink at the surface. So you're going to store them with the label side up. You're not going to store them this way because this is going to defeat the purpose. Stampin' Up! Has them so that when they close, this is where you stamp, and when you close it, the ink is being held at the surface of the pad. So you want to keep your ink pads stacked just like this. So this is how you're going to store them. And it's going to be, then your ink will be ready to go every time that you are. So that's a little bit about Stampin' Up! Ink pads, refilling them, taking care of them, keeping them nice. And I hope that you enjoyed this session of Stamper School. Thank you so much for joining me. If you found this class helpful, let me know. And if you have a product topic that you would like me to cover in a future lesson, I would also love to know that as well. So that's it for Stamper School today. Stay creative and see you in the next session of Stamper School.